Okay, so here is part 2 of the preterite. So now we're going to look at the ER and IR verbs. So again, just like in the last video, we're referring to regular verbs. So regular ER and IR verbs. Okay, this time, so if you remember back to the present tense, your ER and IRs took a split for the nosotros and vosotros forms where you had different forms for each. But now they're completely the same, so it's easier. So you only have one set of endings. Okay, so let's go through your subject pronouns here. So we have yo, tú, él, ella, usted. Always in the same order, right? Nosotros, vosotros, and then ellos, ellas, ustedes. Okay? All right, so for ERs and IRs, your yo form is going to be E, otherwise known as an I with an accent mark. Okay? Now, I know that causes problems, right? Because not only do we have the letter I, and we're saying, it sounds like we're saying the letter E in English, but it's just hard to remember. So remember, ER and IR, it's E, the letter I with the accent. Then tú is iste, so I-S-T-E. El, ella, usted is yo. So we have an accent, just like in the AR verbs, we have accent and accent on the yo form and on the el, ella, usted form. Now, for the yo form, it's easy. It's on the last letter. Well, it's always on the last letter. So just remember, it's always on the O, or always on the last letter for that el, ella, usted form. Okay, nosotros is going to be imos. So if you remember from the present tense, your ER verbs was hemos, E-M-O-S, but your IR verbs were imos. Well, now they're all imos. And again, we're just going to pick that up on context, whether we're talking about the preterite or the present tense. Your vosotros forms are both istes. So again, you can take that iste form, right, and add your is to it to remember it. And then ellos, ellas, ustedes is hieron. Now, I want you to listen closely when I put this into the verb forms and we show a couple examples of the verbs. It's easy to kind of mispronounce this one. So just watch where that stress goes. The stress should go here, hieron. So the stress is on that E, the A sound. So just watch for that. Okay, so let's do our first verb. Let's do comer. So comer, to eat, right? So this would be I ate. I'm going to go ahead and put this one in the chart form. Okay, so the yo form is going to be comí. So just like before, we take off that ER, we add our new letter, our new vowel here, and we don't want to forget the accent. Now, I made my chart kind of small, so I'm going to neglect putting the subject pronouns in, but you should know those by now. So we have comí, accent, comiste, to form, el, ella, usted, comió, accent on that O. Nosotros comimos. Vosotros comisteis. And ellos, ellas, ustedes comieron. So watch your pronunciation on this one, right? Sometimes there's a tendency to punch the ron, but that's not where it should go. Comieron. Okay, so that's an ER verb. So IR verbs, like I said, do the same thing. So let's do vivir. Unintentionally, I did the same two verbs that your book had. I just kind of default to those. So vivir is to live. So this would be I lived, you lived. All right, let me get my chart going. And again, I'm going to skip the subject pronouns because you guys should know them by now. Okay, so yo viví. So I lived. Remember those V's in Spanish are pronounced like B's, viví. And it depends on where, so I say that, and then it really does depend on where it is in the sentence, where it is in the word. Sometimes it'll sound more like a v than a b. Don't worry about that. Just really concentrate mostly on that it needs to sound like a b. Okay, so viví, viviste, vivió, accent. Nosotros vivimos, vosotros vivisteis, and ellos, ustedes vivieron. So there you go. Those are your regular ER verbs and your regular IR verbs. Okay, so to extend a little bit on some of the verbs that you'll encounter, I'm going to go ahead and jump to dar and ver. So just to watch for these. So these, the ones above are regular verbs. Okay, so then, but preterite is full of irregulars, more than probably any other tense. So let's look at dar here. Okay, so dar, your yo form is di. Tú diste. Él, ella, usted dio. Nosotros dimos. Vosotros disteis. And ellos, ellas, ustedes dieron. So if you notice, look at all your endings. So one, this is an AR verb. However, all of your endings actually match up with ER and IR verbs. Just the difference is here, you don't have accents. You may find, if you dig through some old texts, you may find, and I'm sorry, some of these dots look like happy accents there. They're not. So anyway, you may find as you dig through, maybe you find a dio with an accent on the O. It's not supposed to be there, and way back it used to be allowed or required, but really because phonetically it doesn't need it, and it's not confused with any other word, we don't need it. So in class, I would be more flexible, but because you've got the computer grading it, just be careful on that and make sure that you don't put an accent on those because the computer will mark it wrong. So it doesn't need it, like di, because it's just a one-syllable word. And dio, same thing, it's a one-syllable word because the I is the weak vowel, the O is the strong vowel, and so the punch, the stress, goes right where it should because that's the stronger vowel. And it's just a one-syllable word. Okay, so then one more thing to look at here. Let's look at ver. So if you can do dar, you can do ver. They're very similar. Okay, so ver is just vi, viste, vio, vimos, visteis, and vieron. So if you look at these two side by side, right? If you've memorized one, if you have memorized one, you've memorized the other. So just, the difference is the D and the V, right? And again, these are ER, IR type of endings. Only difference is you don't have the accent marks. Okay, so I will try to get another video done that will have spelling changes and a couple other things. But that covers regulars and then dar and ver for now. Adios.